Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. Assalamu alaikum. Greetings of peace. My name is Yusuf Ismail. This is the South African Debate Initiative YouTube channel, and we are basically live. This is a live stream on this Wednesday evening, being the 30th of July, 2025. It's a Wednesday evening in South Africa, and certainly it's going for 9 o'clock. In South Africa, the time is pretty late, late evening. And of course, if you're in the United Kingdom, I think it'll be probably about 7:45. And as you can see in the discussion this evening, the topic is who is basically saying that Israel is committing genocide. I think we've been focusing on this topic now for quite some time. So most of you out there who've been following us for a long time obviously know the drill. You know where we'll be heading, and you know our position by this particular time. This discussion for this evening is inspired by a topic, in fact, a title, a headline in the well-known now new news outlet of Mahdi Hassan, where he essentially asked the particular question: who says Israel is committing a genocide? And he presents a list of politicians, experts, and human rights groups, all of whom are using what we would call the G word to describe Israel's violences in Gaza. But the list is still relatively short, but it's increasing. And the numbers are basically increasing. So I want to share this channel so that people can see the discussion here. And just to give an indication in terms of what we're looking at here. So this is the list from Zeteo. We can share this channel here as a starting point for this evening's. This is a list by, and this chap, Prem Tucker, you see him quite regularly at these press briefings that are being held at the White House. And he's regularly there. Sometimes he's shut down, but he's regularly there. And he's in fact basically questioning a lot of these politicians and leaders and certainly these propagandists in terms of what's happening. So this list here, basically, we go down to it. We read here that Palestinians and a limited number of others, like ourselves, by the way, because we started calling this a genocide long before it became popular. We started calling this a genocide, by the way. This channel here, both mine and Muhammad's channel, we started calling this genocide in October 2023. This is long before it became a popular term to describe Israel. And basically, we are vindicated by the position at this particular juncture. So now, more than 22 months after Israel's attacks on Gaza, here's a list that they've compiled, Zeteo, in terms of politicians, US politicians, countries, organizations that have identified Israel's genocide as genocide. They start off with some of the politicians here. Look at the politicians, one of whom is Rashida Tlaib. Rashida Tlaib, she's the one of the politicians from Michigan, the Democrat from Michigan. AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, well known from New York. Ilhan Omar, we know Ilhan from Minnesota. Ayan Presley, Summer Lee, Al Green. Al Green's quite powerful. Delia Ramirez, Bodie Watson-Coleman, John Garamendi, Marjorie Taylor Greene. This is a Republican, by the way, and she's a right-winger. Marjorie Taylor Greene, that's quite this is a rather surprise in terms of the individuals that are calling this genocide, because of the fact that she's basically on the far right. And if you look at her Twitter post on X, she in fact made the point that the attacks on children, the attacks on civilians are totally unacceptable. So Marjorie Taylor Greene, who was part of the so-called MAGA movement, not in any way with any kind of positive comments, but she's surprisingly one of the few individuals that has called this a genocide. We then go on to nations: Afghanistan, Algeria, Bangladesh, Belize, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Djibouti. You would have thought Egypt would be there. By the way, I just want to make this point. Al-Azhar, I think it was about a week ago, in fact, a couple of days ago, they tweeted, I think the official account of Al-Azhar tweeted that what is happening is a genocide. And within, I think, probably about an hour or maybe a few minutes, they removed that. Al Jazeera, in fact, removed that. We have the time, we'll probably go to there. And that's probably because of the fact that they were experiencing pressure by the government. So it's quite clear that Egypt does not want to antagonize Israel at an official capacity by having its largest institution of Islamic education, Al-Azhar University, calling this out as a genocide. And so, not surprisingly, whilst the Al-Azhar leadership would describe it as a genocide, the Egyptian government, which is clearly a dictatorship of Sisi, desists from calling it a genocide. So then you look at the other countries: Indonesia, Iran, well, not surprisingly there, Iraq, Ireland, Jordan, Kuwait, Kyrgyzstan, Lebanon, Libya, Malaysia, Maldives, Namibia, Nicaragua, Oman, of course, Palestine, Pakistan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Slovenia, South Africa, Spain, that's quite an important member, Syria, Tunisia, Turkey, Venezuela, and Yemen. And then here are a list of some of the human rights organizations. Amnesty International. There was this phenomenal report that we discussed sometime last year, where I think, what was it called? Where it produced an entire report. You think you're human. You think something along that particular line, where they discussed that in detail. It was about a 200-page document, which we went through with you. If we have the time, we may go through that. The Human Rights Watch, we also went through that report last year, where we are told that the crime of extermination and the acts of genocide, and there was a focus on the threat of water deprivation and how that, in fact, basically amounts to. So there was a lengthy discussion there on that specific issue. It was dealt with in detail. And then, of course, you have the University Network for Human Rights. In fact, I think I've got that report with me somewhere. They did I think, an 86-page report. Physicians for Human Rights, Israel. And last, which I want to focus on, which we're probably going to discuss this evening, B'Tselem. B'Tselem, the Israeli human rights organization that basically called it out, in fact, produced a report about 2 days ago. They finally determined that Israel is, in fact, committing genocide, that the discussion is called our genocide. What is quite remarkable and what is quite disconcerting, though, is that determination or that particular finding, as Diana Bhutto states in a report, comes about 22 months later. 22 months later, after, at the very minimum, 60,000 Palestinians were systematically decimated, murdered, massacred. So is it a bit little too late? Is it a bit too little too late? Well, I mean, it depends which side of the equation you're looking at it. B'Tselem is an Israeli human rights organization, by the way. And so from their perspective, obviously they are Israelis. They have in the past exposed the horrific conditions that Palestinians experience within Israeli dungeons. And not surprisingly, What basically happened in the given circumstances is that they produced a 150-page document, which we also discussed last year. It was a document called "Welcome to Hell." For those of you who have been following our programming for the past couple of months, we went through that comprehensively. That document called "Welcome to Hell." So I want to share this document here. This is a document which is produced by B'Tselem. And I just want to basically see if I can share this so that people can see what we're looking at here. Let me open this screenshot and see if I can share this particular document. This is the Israeli. This is the 88-page document that was produced 2 days ago by this organization called B'Tselem, the Israeli Human Rights Organization. We can share this on the screen, Mohammed. Yeah, there we are. That's the organization. So this is the 88-page document. I'm going to expand this, and this document goes into detail in terms of what Israel is doing, why they're doing what they're doing, and of course the main aim. So it opens up by giving an introduction in terms of what is genocide. It presents us the methodology in terms of how they come to the conclusion that this is genocide, like many of the other previous reports. And then it actually goes through the different steps: the killing and causing serious bodily and mental harm in the West Bank, inside Israel itself, and of course the entire eradication and destruction of the Gaza Strip. So this is basically a comprehensive report, which I urge you to go. You go to btselem.org, go to btselem.org, and it'll open you up to the website. And if you're there now, you'll probably see that this would be on the front cover page of the particular website. So a lot of the information presented here is something we already know. So if you start off, for example, with page 19, if you go to page 19, it'll go on into details. This is all the background and the history and what the genocide really means, and so on and so forth. The methodology is the data, information, documentation of cases that they've collated over the past several months. And then, of course, they go into the actual instances itself where the killings happen. So this is more, in fact, if you were to talk about the most updated report on the genocide that's happening now, this would be the most updated report. We've discussed the Amnesty International report. We've discussed the very first time the application to the International Court of Justice made by South Africa. That was it was like a lifetime ago. January, February 2024. And the facts and figures there, I think back then we probably had, I can't even recall now, but I think back then we had something like 10 or 12,000 people that were just killed. I say the word just, it's actually quite a large figure, such a short period. But now we obviously are sitting at in excess of 100,000, even though the conservative estimates are 58,000. By the way, for those who are questioning this, these estimates by international standards, whilst propagandists have questioned them, are still viewed as extremely conservative. In fact, these are the figures that the IDF also gives. Even though their propagandists may be saying something else, the IDF gives these figures, even though by the standards of what we are told, they are quite conservative in the given circumstances. This was the report we discussed last year. If you recall, those of us who have been following us, you feel like you are subhuman. Israel's genocide in Gaza. This was produced, by the way, I think it was in June 2024. Work of Physicians for Human Rights. Phenomenal report. And we discussed that in detail, where we showed in that specific report systematic case studies where, the general argumentation about civilians or human shields, or the fact that there was a target, in about close to 20 or 30 case studies that were given in that specific report, it showed that in each and every single case study that was meticulously analyzed, there was no attempt by the IDF to go and target anyone. It was just simply a random killing without any specification or challenging or getting anyone for that particular matter. So that's one step. So here's basically the report, and this report goes into the full details of the assault of Palestinians. The results here that are basically given are that approximately in July 2025, 15% of the fatalities are women, 29% are minor, and 7% are elderly. So 15% of the women, 29% are minor, and 7% are elderly. So how much does that make? 29 plus 15. So it's 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, plus another 7% are elderly. So you're looking at about 50, 51%, give or take, maybe 52, 53, let's just say 55%. 55% of the individuals then, let's assume all the men, because there are men obviously that were being killed, but let's assume that every man is a Hamas affiliate, which is rubbish because that's not the case. But let's assume that you exclude all the men out of the equation, all the men, you leave them out completely. That still amounts to approximately 55%, the vast majority of the people by the standard that are murdered by the Israeli Defense Force are in fact the innocents, people who are non-combatants. Let's assume all the males are combatants, which is rubbish, which is not true, which we know is not true. But even for the sake of argument, let's assume that that is the case. Even by that standard, you're looking at 55% of the population are non-combatants, and they are in the majority of the people that have been murdered by the Israeli Defense Force. For women, life expectancy fell by 38% to an estimated 47.5 years, a loss of 29.9 years. Imagine your life expectancy falling to approximately 38%. 38%. Do people understand the scale of what we're doing, of what we're looking at? And as I've clearly pointed out, that several studies suggest that these figures represent an underestimation. This is exactly what we've been saying. Exactly what we've been saying. Because the Lancet, if you look at the Lancet report, their death toll is way higher, way higher. The death toll of the Lancet is extremely tenfold. This is the Lancet report as at the 7th of October to the 30th of June. You're looking at figures close to approximately 100,000 at that stage. At that stage, we were looking at about approximately 100,000 in terms of the Lancet, the medical journal called the Lancet, 100,000. So their figures are basically an underestimate. Even the Palestinian Ministry of Health figure is an underestimate. The mortality rate is tenfold. So when you hear 60,000, that's a 60,000 conservative estimate. The figures are in the hundreds of thousands. And I wouldn't be surprised now, possibly even 200,000 at this particular juncture. So that's a reality of the situation in terms of what we have at this particular point in time now. So we go back to that. Where are we? It was page. Yeah, we're here. It was here on page 16. So If you look at this particular report here, it speaks also about the escalation of violence in the West Bank, in East Jerusalem, and within Israel itself. And it states that the ones that are carrying the bombing of the refugee camps and killing of civilians are the same ones, same policies that have been enacted in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Certainly not the scale of what you see in Gaza, but nonetheless, expulsion, dispossession, neglect, all of that is happening in those occupied territories as well. And what's the Palestinian Authority doing? What is the Palestinian Authority doing? Nothing. Nothing at all. Goes into airstrikes. It discusses humanitarian zone. Humanitarian zones, which were meant to provide IDPs safety, offered unlivable conditions, and they were themselves systematically bombed. They were themselves systematically bombed. These humanitarian sites, humanitarian zones, they were bombed by Israel on many occasions. So, how do you justify that? If you look at the New York Times report, this is the New York Times report. Have a look at this. These are safe zones. £2,000 bombs. Look at this. Look at this.
Giant craters in the earth,
Sorry.
like this strike in South Gaza in November. This is an area in Gaza where for weeks civilians fled to find safety.
So this is what they call the zone, the safe zone, where Israel tells the Palestinians to go to. It's a safe zone. Israel tells the Palestinians to go to the safe zone. You know, this idea about giving warnings and so on, how convenient. They're actually telling the Palestinians to go to the safe zones. This is what Israel is doing. Look at that, 2,000-pound bombs.
These are 2,000-pound bombs. One of the most destructive munitions in Western military arsenals. When a 2,000-pound bomb detonates, it unleashes a blast wave and metal fragments thousands of feet in every direction. Sometimes, 2,000-pound bombs leave giant craters in the earth.
Look at that.
Like
Did you
this
see
strike.
that? Look at this. Look at the crater it's created. Imagine the destruction and dead bodies under that. Imagine that.
In South Gaza in November.
أولاد الأربعة لا إله إلا الله أولاد الأربعة لا إله إلا الله.
Munitions experts say 2,000-pound bombs are almost never used by the U.S. military anymore in densely populated areas. Israel says it must destroy Hamas above and below ground to prevent terrorist attacks like October 7th, and claims it's taking extraordinary measures to protect civilians. But a Times investigation using aerial imagery and artificial intelligence found visual evidence suggesting Israel used these munitions in the area it designated safe for civilians at least 200 times.
Did you catch that?
Our analysis
How many
indicates
times did it keep
2,000-pound
the
bombs
area safe?
designated safe for civilians.
Look at what the
least
reporter
agents
says.
Found visual evidence suggesting Israel used these munitions in the area it designated safe for civilians at least 200 times.
200 times, folks.
Our analysis indicates 2,000-pound bombs were dropped on a routine basis in South Gaza during the first 6 weeks of the war. And it suggests that even for those who followed every Israeli evacuation order and advisory, there was still no safety to be found in a war zone that's more dangerous for civilians than any in recent history. Amplifying the danger are many factors. Hamas intentionally uses dense civilian areas to position military personnel and weapons. Buried underground, are vast tunnel
And
networks
this is
used
where
by
the
Hamas fighters.
propaganda by the New York Times comes in, where they are basically raising the aspect of using tunnels, human shields, and all of that.
But no bomb shelters for civilians. When the war started, Israel completely sealed off Gaza's borders and claimed it was going to keep civilians out of the crossfire by establishing a safe zone and issuing evacuation orders. By air, phone, and social media, over 1 million people living in northern Gaza were told they must move to the south to be safe.
The IDF is calling for the people of Gaza to evacuate to southern Gaza.
Imagine that.
To go south of this river.
We heard this guy, Conricus, another con man, Jonathan Con artist. The talk was go south, and you'll be safe.
Move south for your own safety. Move
Agari.
south.
But the evacuation routes and the safe zone were anything but safe. How often the attacks were launched by Hamas is unclear. But visual evidence indicates Israel was dropping 2,000-pound bombs in the area it was ordering civilians to go. The Times
It's
programmed
ordering civilians to go in a particular area, and then it drops 2,000-pound bombs. Well, what is that? How do you excuse that? So it gives you notification to move. You know those people who justify, oh, how convenient, Israel gives you notification to move. So it's kind of them to give you notification and dropping leaflets. When you move, what then happens to the area it tells you to go to? It drops 2,000-pound bombs on you. Liars.
Artificial intelligence tool to analyze satellite imagery of South Gaza to search for bomb craters. The AI tool detected over 1,600 possible craters. We manually reviewed each one to weed out the false positives, like shadows, water towers, or bomb craters from a previous conflict. We measured the remaining craters to find ones that spanned roughly 40 feet across or more, which experts say are typically formed only by 2,000-pound bombs. Ultimately, we identified 208 of these craters in satellite imagery and drone footage, indicating 2,000-pound bombs posed a pervasive threat to civilians seeking safety across South Gaza. It's likely that more of these bombs were used than what was captured in our reporting. Because of limited satellite imagery, our analysis omits parts of South Gaza, and military experts say that often, depending on the target, fuse, and type of soil, a 2,000-pound bomb may not leave a crater at all. Even bomb craters that are visible from the sky do not convey the destruction unleashed on the ground. This crater in central Khan Yunis was from an airstrike in October. More than a dozen people were reportedly killed. Scores were injured or buried under the rubble. Hours later, Israel took responsibility, posting video of the strike and a photo of the alleged target, a top Hamas official they said was key in planning the October 7th attack. Israel has said it must take out Hamas leaders no matter where they're hiding.
But at what cost? Let's assume that even that argument makes sense. At what cost? Are you going to kill 100, 200, 300, 1,000 people to get one man? And in most instances, we know there were no evidence of any Hamas fighters or Hamas affiliates there.
Our goal, and we're taking extraordinary efforts to achieve it, is to minimize civilian casualties. This is
Imagine the audacity.
And here's the problem. We're faced with the most vicious kind of enemy who not only attacks civilians, but commits the other war crime of deliberately hiding behind their civilians. They use them as human shields.
Where we heard that before.
In response to questions about the use of 2,000-pound bombs in South Gaza, an Israeli military spokesman told The Times that Israel's priority is destroying Hamas, and, quote, questions of this kind will be looked into at a later stage.
Questions of this kind will be looked into at a later stage. And then what? It'll be too late. once the genocide is completed.
They also said that, quote, in stark contrast to Hamas's intentional attacks, the IDF, quote, follows international law and takes feasible precautions to mitigate civilian harm. But
Well,
the U.S.
they take a precision aim on them when they tell them to go to a safe zone.
says Israel must do more to avoid civilian casualties. The Pentagon recently increased shipments of a smaller bomb called the GBU-39, which U.S. officials say can strike underground targets and is better suited to urban environments like Gaza. The GBU-39.
So this is a report in the New York Times. By the way, New York Times is a pro-Israeli newspaper. It's not in any way, non-biased in any way, shape, or form. It's a pro-Israeli news article. But I just wanted to show that even in these pro-Israeli news pieces, you are able to find the truth there. That the reality of the situation is, in fact, that Israel is killing all and sundry without any compunction whatsoever, no compunction whatsoever. And the idea about concern about the Palestinian people by virtue of giving them notification is debunked by the whole notion that when these people who are displaced go to the safe zone, they're murdered. They're systematically bombed. That's the whole point. The Al-Mawasi humanitarian zone, that's what Zovatelli, the Israeli ambassador UK, I still remember up to now on Sky News, she kept on speaking about the Al-Mawasi humanitarian zone where the Palestinians will be kept. That has increased in frequency after May 2024. That area was bombed 97 times. Imagine that, 97 times that particular area. The Gaza humanitarian zone struck almost, this is a BBC report, 100 times since May. BBC Verify says 100 times. More than 100 times. I mean, how do you make this up? How do you justify this? This was a zone that they were supposed to go to in the end to protect civilians, to keep them out of harm's way, to expand to places like Khan Yunis and Deir Bala. And they were bombed. They were bombed. And the Palestinians were killed in those areas, in those specific safe zones. So what do you do in a situation like that? What on earth do you do in a situation like that? And so coming back to this particular assessment by B'Tselem, there's no justification in relation to this. I just want to come back to that piece. And we're going to focus on we're going to go through some of this material. There's so much to go through here. But use this as a means to share with your friends and with your neighbors and all of them. This was it here. The Al-Mawasi humanitarian bombed 97 times. Now BBC report says 100 times. Mohammed Gharab, a resident who was displaced to Al-Mawasi East, described an airstrike he witnessed in 13 July. The attack, which Israel claimed targeted two Hamas, including its leader, was the deadliest strike on the humanitarian zone Al-Mawasi. A total of 90 people were killed and 300 wounded in the attack. 300 were injured in the attack. And he goes on to describe what it is. The horror, the shock, incomprehensible, according to him. In many of the reports we've seen them, people are being burned to death. Again, we saw this particular report. Ahmed al-Dalu, the famous, I think, what was it? The journalist at one point, and then subsequently there was a boy that walked through. We saw them burning before our very eyes. We could do nothing about it. Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. And this basically then takes me, and we're going to come to this, but I just want to talk about the assault, the crime, the fact that this has basically become policy, besides the actual killing. But the more important thing now that we're witnessing is, as we can see quite clearly, the starvation, the growing short footages, the food security, using starvation as a method of warfare or a weapon of warfare. And this was in January 2024, long before, people were crying, wolf, wolf. And now really there is a wolf. UN experts had already warned there was no precedent for the speed and scale of starvation inflicted on the civilian population as witnessed in Gaza, adding that Israel is destroying Gaza's food system and using weapon as a war against the Palestinian people. Throughout the months of his assault, Israel denied it, of course, like Netanyahu denied it. They blamed Hamas, but this claim was denied by the UN and aid agencies involved. Two U.S. government agencies responsible for coordinating humanitarian concluded, these are U.S. agencies, that Israel had deliberately delayed and obstructed the entry of humanitarian assistance in Gaza and that it bore primary responsibility for the hunger there. Since Israel broke the ceasefire in March 2025, the starvation has become an open and official declared public policy of Israel. According to an assessment, approximately 1.95 million people, 93% were suffering from food insecurity. That's the majority of the population, all the population. Of these, 244,000 were living in catastrophic hunger. The most extreme classification used by the IPC, the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification Initiative. By comparison, in October 2024, the IPC estimated that the number of people experiencing catastrophic hunger stood at 133,000. It projected that absent policy change back then, the number would reach 470,000 by September 2025. That's 22% of Gaza's population. 22%. And then we've got case study reports here. Hala Shashua, a 40-year-old mother of 5 who lived in Gaza City before the war began, spoke to B'Tselem. And then now we come to the most important thing, routine killings at distribution aid centers. We saw the images and we saw the pictures. This death squad, known as the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, they began operating 4 secure distribution sites where Gaza residents ostensibly receive food. And according to the figures, 758, now more than 1,000 have been murdered, and more than 5,000 were injured trying to get food at the distribution center. There was a report by Haaretz in June 2025 how officers and soldiers described how they were ordered to open fire on the crowd and push them away from the food distribution points. Firing shells, including at people attempting to flee. In fact, they state that the firing became standard practice. Standard practice, the fire, the actual shooting. Standard practice. And you know where they shot them as well? Do you know also where they shot them? Let me show you here. They were engaged, as one UK doctor stated in an interview on Good Morning Britain, they were used as target practice. Target practice. Let me show you where the boys were shot. This is a report where boys are being shot. I'm going to share this here and see if I can open this and share this, and then we'll come back. We'll come back to this. Stop sharing. I'm going to share this. Let's see if we can share this report here. This is where they are shooting boys and teenagers. Have a look at this. Mohammed, can we just show this? Look where they're shooting them. Israel shooting Palestinian teenage boys in the genitals. One of the doctors from the University of Oxford was there. He gave the report on Good Morning Britain. Why would you want to shoot boys and youngsters and minors in the genitals? Why, Israel? Why would you do that? Explain that to me. Explain how that is. Those who want to have pushback, explain how you can get pushback with that. Starving baby. Shame. An international doctor working in the besieged Gaza news strip told Channel 4 News that he's treating a disturbing number of injuries linked to the Israeli the so-called death squad called the GHF. And he says teenage boys are arriving with gunshot wounds to the same part of the body. Teenage boys are arriving in the hospital, all shot in the testicles. Why would they shoot? How sick can that be? How sick can you be there?
Paraded through the streets for one final goodbye. A familiar scene for Palestinians, this time not Gaza, but the occupied West Bank, where on Friday 2 men, including a Palestinian American, were killed by Israeli settlers in Sinjar, north of Ramallah. 20-year-old Saifullah Musalut, nicknamed Saif, was born in Florida, but was visiting relatives on family land when he was attacked.
I want to come to this point of the doctor in terms of what he says.
Well, joining me now from Tel Aviv is former Israeli diplomat Alon Pincus, who was an advisor to 2 Israeli prime ministers. Thanks very much for joining us. More desperate scenes every day coming out of Gaza. Children killed waiting for water today. The need for a ceasefire is clear. The talks currently ongoing. How likely are they to be successful?
Oh, I wish I knew, Jackie, because a few days ago I was optimistic. Then I was cautiously optimistic. Then I was optimistic with a bunch of caveats and reservations, and now I don't know what to tell you, because this is a war that's been going on or prolonged for over a year beyond what was necessary, what was justifiable. And then there was a ceasefire in January that was violated in March by Israel, as a matter of fact. And now there's a ceasefire that there's absolutely no reason not to have unless someone does.
Come back to this, but this is just something that I wanted to show you to give you an indication that these people are being shot in the genitals. There's no justification, no explanation for this. How do you explain the shooting of the genitals? Is there any way to explain that? None whatsoever. So we go back to this report by B'Tselem. We're going to finish this report here. If I can just open the screen again. We can share our screen. Here we are back. So coming back to this, they were killing non-combatants, killing innocent people. It's been normalized. When we asked why they opened fire, we were told, this is a report by where officers and soldiers were questioned. I think we discussed that report from Haaretz. We were told it was an order from above and that civilians has posed a threat. I can say with certainty that people were not close to the forces and did not endanger them. It was pointless. They were just killed for nothing. This thing called killing innocent people, it's been normalized. We are constantly told there are no non-combatants in Gaza, and apparently the message sank in among the troops. And then, of course, it goes on to forcible transfer. Destruction of electricity and water. They've destroyed everything in Gaza. They've destroyed everything in relation to that. We won't even go there. They've even destroyed the solar energy infrastructure. Water supply was cut off on the 9th of October, later restored, but in a limited matter. As the assault continued, the Israeli military destroyed 84% of Gaza's water facilities, including those intended for drinking water and others for hygiene, sewage treatment, irrigation. There's shit all over the place. All these facilities were hit by Israeli airstrikes. The Israeli military prevented efforts to repair them. So they destroyed all of that. That was gone. Then sanitary conditions. Gaza has become a center of a transparent biological warfare, biological war that poses a risk not only to the local population, but also to the potential global public health. How do you think the COVID virus hit us? Well, that's another story. But the rumor goes that it started off at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Some said the Wuhan wet market. But the point is, in a limited contained area, it spread globally. What about the potential biological war and the development of antibiotic-resistant bacterial infection? And nobody discusses this. What about the long-term effects that epidemiologists and health experts from the Lancet, by the way, have mentioned? The hospitals we've seen totally destroyed. They say 17 out of 36 are partially functioning, but they're not functioning. If you go and see these hospitals, you wouldn't want to even stay in these hospitals. They are finished. They are destroyed. People and doctors are operating without anesthesia. Women are basically having cesarean sections where their stomachs are cut open without anesthesia, and they're dying. Once a baby is removed, they're dying. The pain is just too much, or they collapse in pain. Collapse in pain completely. And it goes on and goes on and goes on. Domicide is a destruction of infrastructure. They destroyed everything. You know, we see the report, and I've seen it on Piers Morgan. He mentions 70% of Gaza's actual infrastructure is destroyed. It's actually more. He's lying. It's 92% of all residential buildings. 69% of all structures have been destroyed or severely damaged. Entire neighborhoods and even entire cities have been wiped out. Entire cities have been wiped out. Rafah, for example, is gone. Rafah, totally destroyed. Razed to the ground. It's not the only city wiped out by the Israeli army. Look at that. Look at that. What about Beit Lahia? What about the Jabalia refugee camp? All are gone. The scale of destruction stands out as the most extreme war cases in modern history. In Jabalia, there is no longer a house, a tree, or a single human being. It has become a vast wasteland, its residents forcibly displaced and its animals killed, and even its trees cut down and left to wither. This image will stand as a testament to one of the darkest and most harrowing periods in our history. In the 20 months that passed, the Israeli Defense Forces have destroyed Beit Lahia, Beit Hanun, eastern Gaza City, and the suburbs of Khan Yunis, and the IDF is now completing the erasure of Rafah. I mean, they've destroyed everything. Everything is destroyed completely and utterly. Nothing there. Look at that. Look at this. The report by the Haaretz says the destruction of Rafah stands out. It is more widespread and methodical than the damage imposed on Aleppo, Mosul, Sarajevo, and Kabul. The extent of devastation recalls the heavy damage sustained by the Ukrainian city of Bakhmut, though the population of that city was 1/4 that of Rafah. Imagine that. Imagine that. Imagine that. So, coming back to this report here, the destruction that is taking place, the assault on the family unit. Israel's assault has destroyed families completely and utterly. Let's go to the index, and I want to probably see some of the articles in the index, some of the pointers in the index. So there's airstrike and population displacement, open fire regulations and kill zones, wounded persons, lack of treatment, indirect deaths, psychological trauma, airstrikes, open fire policy, and Jewish militias in the West Bank. This is reached endemic proportions, these militias that are killing and murdering people. It's on page 26. Well, what do you do in a situation like this? What on earth do you do? Look at this example here. In 2025, during the raid on the Tamun, an Israeli aircraft fired a missile that killed 3 cousins, 2 of them children, near their homes. In a military investigation, the military claimed that the man and the 2 children be identified as individuals who planted explosive devices based on intelligence information. But, as usual, no explosive device were ultimately found in that area. None whatsoever. None. Open fire policy. During the first 3 weeks of the assault in Gaza, 118 people were killed in the West Bank by Israeli military fire. Now, what's there on the West Bank? Is there Hamas as a corrupt Palestinian Authority? But what threat do these people pose? It states here that even by their standards, 81 people of the 118 pose no threat, yet the Israeli forces opened fire and murdered them. 195 of them were minors. Minors. In July 31st, 2024, Israeli soldiers raided the home of Hala Rajabi, a mother of 9 in central Hebron. The soldiers assaulted Hala and her children. By the way, because people always talk about Gaza and West Bank, this is in Hebron. This is in Hebron. And they brutally assaulted her. The deliberate neglect has become policy since this is on starvation, since Itamar Ben-Gvir took office as Minister of National Security. According to a 2024 study by the Emergency Headquarters Against Crime and Violence, 87% of Palestinian citizens of Israel personally know someone who has been harmed or killed or been a recipient of violence of crime. And 82% reported feeling unsafe in their own communities. In addition, 80% said they were afraid to contact the Israeli police or file complaints against members of crime organizations active in their communities. This fear is rooted in the consistent failure of the Israeli police to address organized crime. This is inside Israel. This is inside Israel proper. So they've been killed in Gaza, they've been killed in West Bank, they've been killed now inside Israel. So the blood of Arab citizens are cheap. As B'Tselem reports that in 2024, only about 15% of murder cases in Arab localities were solved by the police. Only 15%. Destruction of food, using starvation. This is what we are going to, starvation as a weapon of war. We spoke about this from then, and now we have a situation where the starvation is catastrophic. It's totally catastrophic. Totally catastrophic. Forced displacement in the West Bank. In 2025, Katz, defense minister, said that the army intended to remain in refugee camps throughout the coming year. So they want to stay there. So in January 25, cities and refugee camps in the northern West Bank have become ghost towns, now solely occupied by military forces. forced displacement inside Israel, anarchy, increasing of criminal gangs. By the way, a lot of these criminal gangs, armed criminal gangs that are involved in looting, were actually backed by Israel. Israel has not only allowed these gangs to gain control, but suggested that it might entrust them with future responsibility for maintaining public order. Imagine that. This is in Le Monde. Netanyahu's losing gamble on Gaza claim. They want these gangs ideally to take over. Mass evacuation orders. By the way, I'm reading this as we are doing it in real time because I hadn't had time. This was just released about 3 days ago. So I'm going through it as well with you, trying to ascertain what I can pick up from here. What about East Jerusalem, the violent display? Nobody talks about East Jerusalem. And within Israel proper, you see people talk about destruction of land in the West Bank, obliteration of Gaza. But what about inside Israel? The Israeli government transferred the authority for the enforcement of land laws from the Ministry of Finance, that's Smotrich, to the Minister of National Security, that's Itamar Ben-Gvir. Imagine that, from Smotrich, from the fire to the firing pan, from the firing pan to the fire. And these people, you say, are not powerful players? And since that happened, there's been a 400% increase in demolition orders. 400% increase in demolition orders issued for homes in the Negev. Imagine that. As a result, 1,000 people were left homeless. This is inside Israel. And then they get these criminal gangs to support them. Abu Shahab. So one can go on and on and on. I mean, murder, rape, people being killed whilst after giving birth. The testimonies go on and on. So this is the entire report that we basically see. I mean, we haven't even come to things like the destruction of the schools. 90% of schools, I would say not even 90%, 100% of all schools are totally destroyed. Totally destroyed. Press coverage, totally not there. Well, I mean, of course, there's Al Jazeera, there's Tariq Abu Azum, and many of these remarkable journalists. But the rest, destroyed. Israel has destroyed approximately 206 archaeological and historical sites in Gaza, including public markets and ancient neighborhoods, some over 1,000 years old. What's the purpose of this, Hamas? Is this human shields? Are these museums being used as human shields? Libraries, museums, archives, theaters, all destroyed inside Gaza's, including Gaza's Central Archive. They want to destroy the history. They want to destroy the history. A UN Commission of Inquiry assessed that the building's interior was likely set on fire during the period when Israeli forces were operating in the area. What do you say about that? At that stage, when they're operating in the area, you find the destruction taking place. Mosques, well, mosques are totally out. But not only mosques, they also destroy churches. They've killed people in churches. Just about 2 weeks ago, they killed someone in a church. Heritage sites, religious rituals, all come to a stop. It's not just against Muslims, it's Christians as well. And this is within Israel itself. And then, of course, the prison as a system of torture camps. This was the report we basically saw in Welcome to Hell. And, of course, subsequently, the sexual abuse and the rape at Sde Teiman torture camp. That was opposed by us completely. And so this is basically the entire report. I mean, I would urge members out there, download this particular report, have a look at it, study it, share it. Let's just come to the conclusion, and we'll end on that point there until we move to the next. I'm a bit down for the weather. I had a long day. I'm pretty much exhausted. It's going for after 10, and I've got an early day tomorrow. But this is the conclusion by B'Tselem. Have a look at this. Whilst genocide is underway in the Gaza Strip, the Israeli regime is leading an assault on the Palestinian population in the West Bank and a policy of egregious rights violations against Palestinian citizens of Israel, as they basically show. So they talk about Israel itself. The form and extent may vary across the different areas under Israel's control, but they're rooted in the same underlying logic: denial of Palestinian humanity. Denial of Palestinian humanity. The routine killing and destruction in the Gaza Strip and the forced displacement of tens of thousands in the West Bank would not have been possible without international inaction in the face of unfathomable scale and severity of these crimes. Most of these crimes have been extensively documented and made public over the past 2 years. Yet many state leaders, particularly in Europe and the United States, have not, and may I add also Muslim countries as well, have not only refrained from effective action to stop, but enabled it through statements, Israel's right to self-defense, active support, shipment of weapons, all of that. All of that. ICJ stated there's a genocide, plausible risk of committing genocide, that Israel is plausibly committing genocide. But this is a shame on all of us. In the immediate term, the recognition that the Israeli regime is committing genocide in the Gaza Strip and the deep concern that it may expand to other areas where Palestinians live under Israeli rule demand urgent and unequivocal action from both the Israeli society and the international community. But will that happen? This is a time to act. This is a time to save those who have not been lost forever and use every means available under international law to stop Israel's genocide of the Palestinians. This is what's required. This is the B'Tselem report. Go to B'Tselem. You can read either the full report, which is 88 pages, or you can download the summary. I've went through the full report with you, not entirely, but still have a look at it and see. And this is the report by one of the compilers who is with B'Tselem, and hear what they say pertaining to this particular report.
זה בלתי נתפס, אבל כמעט שנתיים שישראל מבצעת ג'נוסייד בפלסטינים ברצועת עזה. ג'נוסייד הוא דבר שלא אמור לקרות, לא פה ולא בשום מקום ולא בכלל. זה מסוג הדברים שפשוט לא יכולה להיות להם הצדקה. לא האמנו שנכתוב את הדוח הזה אי פעם, אבל אנחנו גם חיים בתוך מציאות שלא האמנו שנגיע אליה. על סמך המידע והנתונים שהצטברו ועל בסיס ניתוח עמוק ויסודי של הסיטואציה, ברור לנו שישראל פועלת באופן מכוון ומתואם להביא להרס טוטלי של הפלסטינים ברצועת עזה.
Genocide זה הרס אלים.
It's basically clear that Israel is acting with intent to kill.
של קבוצה מובחנת, במיוחד קבוצה אתנית, לאומית, דתית או גזעית, כקבוצה, כלומר הקורבן בג'נוסייד הוא לא רק האינדיבידואלים שחברים בקבוצה, אלא גם הקבוצה כקבוצה.
ג'נוסייד תמיד ילווה במחיקת האנושיות של הקורבנות, כלומר בדה-הומניזציה שלהם. תביני, עזה נבנתה במשך עשורים בראש של הישראלים כמין חור שחור. בני אדם שחיים שם הם אלה שאפשר להטיל עליהם מצור, שאפשר להתקיף בהפצצות בלתי
What
מובחנות.
Norman Finkelstein stated, mowing the lawn. Whenever it happens, you mow the lawn.
הם אלה שאפשר היה במשך שנים לפגוע בהם בלי לשאת בשום אחריות ובלי לתת על כך את הדין. לג'נוסייד תמיד יהיה הסבר ונימוק. לרוב ההצדקה שלו תהיה צורך בהגנה עצמית. איזו תחושה...
Look what they say. Generally, there's an existential threat and the right to self-defense. That's what the argument is. That's what was raised in Rwanda as well. The right to self-defense. That's what the Nazis were raising as well. And this is what Israel is doing as well.
ממשית של איום קיומי. המתקפה המחרידה של חמאס ב7 באוקטובר עוררה אצל רוב הישראלים בדיוק תחושה כזו.
לכל ג'נוסייד יש טריגר, ובמקרה של הג'נוסייד שלנו, הטריגר שהוביל לתמיכה של כל כך הרבה מהציבור הישראלי במהלכי הממשלה, זאת ההתקפה הנפשעת של חמאס נגד עוטף עזה.
They use that as a trigger.
ההרג של כל כך הרבה אזרחים ישראלים, החטיפה של ילדים.
So this is basically not a pro-Palestinian organization or a biased organization. This is an Israeli, these are Israelis, so of course they're going to be against what Hamas did on October 7th. They're going to speak out against that. But they're at least honest enough to state that whatever follows thereafter was a genocide.
הטראומה נפלה על כר פורה מבחינת הממשלה הימנית קיצונית ביותר שאי פעם הייתה לנו בהיסטוריה של ישראל.
The most extreme government Israel has ever had.
זאת בכלל תקופה של נס. זאת פשוט הזדמנות מבחינתם, כדי לקדם אג'נדה שהם ניסו לקדם כבר שנים רבות.
מדה מוחלטת, תמחה את זכר עמלק.
אין עם פלסטיני.
There's no Palestinian people. There's no such thing.
אין דבר כזה.
אנחנו נותנים לכם את האפשרות, לכו מכאן לארצות אחרות. ארץ ישראל שלנו. אני עובד 21 שנים בארגון בצלם. משהו קרה אחרי השבעי באוקטובר, זה פתיחה השערים של גיהנום.
We will blot out the memory of Amalek. I'll take you to what Amalek is all about for those who don't know. Maybe we'll have a program maybe one day in the future when I'm not as tired as this evening about was the Amalekite massacre a moral atrocity. There are no uninvolved civilians. That's what the soldiers are saying.
שילוב של פרקטיקות ג'נוסיידליות, כלומר הרג המוני והרעבה והרס התשתיות האזרחיות, וגם אפשר להוסיף הרס מוסדות תרבות, וגם מדיניות שלפחות מכוונת או מוצהרת של למעשה טיהור אתני. כל זה בשילוב עם הצהרות של הרבה מאוד בכירים ישראלים לאורך המלחמה, שאנחנו מכוונים להרס החברה העזתית כקבוצה.
מספר ההרוגים עלה על 57,000, זה כמעט קרוב ל3% מהאוכלוסייה של עזה. ההרג הפך להיות שגרת חיים. ואפילו השימוש בכל סוגי הנשק נגד האוכלוסייה האזרחית, כולל הרעבה. ברגע שאתה רואה ילדים, כמעט קרוב ל3% מהאוכלוסייה של עזה. ההרג הפך להיות שגרת חיים. ואפילו השימוש בכל סוגי הנשק נגד האוכלוסייה האזרחית, כולל הרעבה. ברגע שאתה רואה ילדים מתאספים בתור ארוך ונאבקים אחד עם השני בשביל לקבל טיפת מים או לקבל צלחת של אורז או עדשים, אתה רואה שהאנושות כאן היא איבדה את החוש האנושי האמיתי. אתה רואה, נגיד, בניין שלם שנהרס על משפחה, ואתה שומע קולות של אנשים מתחת להריסות, הם לא יכולים להוציא אותה. אח של עובדת שטח שלנו, עם אשתו ובת שלו, בת 9, עד עכשיו הגופות שלהם מתחת להריסות של הבניין. זה היום יום שלנו. לצערי, כן. זה היום יום שלנו. כבר שנתיים.
הג'נוסייד מתבצע עכשיו ברצועת עזה. אבל את ההחמרה באלימות של ישראל כלפי הפלסטינים אנחנו רואים בכל מקום. וברור לנו לגמרי שהג'נוסייד יכול בכל רגע להתפשט גם לגדה המערבית. אין שום גוף, שום מנגנון שפועל כרגע לעצור אותו.
אנחנו מדברים מאז 7 אוקטובר ועד עכשיו כמעט 960 הרוגים פלסטינים, מתוכם 181 ילדים, 69 הפצצות מהאוויר על המחנות הפליטים בצפון הגדה. יותר מ-40,000 תושבים נזרקו מהבתים שלהם. ביום יום יש ביצוע של הריסות מהאוויר על המחנות הפליטים בצפון הגדה. יותר מ-40,000 תושבים נזרקו מהבתים שלהם. ביום יום יש ביצוע של הריסות בתוך המחנות האלו. התקפות של המתנחלים על הקהילות הבדואיות ועל החקלאים הפלסטינים, שגרמה לעזיבתם של 29 קהילות פלסטיניות מהמקום מגוריהם.
מה שקורה עכשיו בגדה המערבית זה פשוט זליגה של פרקטיקות מרצועת עזה.
What's happening in the West Bank is a spillover of what's happening in Gaza. That's what B'Tselem states.
היקף, העיקרון וההיגיון.
Not on the same scale, but the same principle and logic.
בתוך ישראל ההשתקה והרדיפה של פלסטינים, ולא רק של פלסטינים, מגיע לרמות חסרות תקדים. אנשים מפחדים לדבר. אנשים מפחדים אפילו להביע רגש או כאב על מה שקורה בעזה.
כל פלסטיני שמביא אפילו הזדהות עם הקורבנות בעזה, עם הילדים של עזה, הוא נעצר.
זאת לא הפעם הראשונה שהעולם עומד מנגד בזמן שמתבצע ג'נוסייד, ההיסטוריה המוכרת. אבל זאת כן פעם הראשונה שאנשים לוקחים טלפונים ניידים ומשדרים בלייב.
She says it's not the first time that people are standing by. I mean, look at it. Whenever there was a genocide in history, the Cambodian genocide of Khmer Rouge, World War II, most of us were not there. None of us, I don't think, at least those who are watching the stream, unless, of course, you are born in the 40s, will remember that in live time. We all heard of it, but nobody stopped the genocide. In Cambodia, nobody stopped the genocide. In Rwanda and Yugoslavia, nobody stopped the genocide. But this is the first time that you are seeing live stream footage of a genocide, which we never saw in Rwanda or Yugoslavia or any of the other areas. This is the first time you are seeing live stream footage on your phone daily, day in and day out, and we can do nothing. That's why it's pressing home so much more.
תמונות של בניינים שהופצצו על ידי מטוסי חיל האוויר כשמשפחות שלמות נמצאות בתוכם. אנשים עומדים עם סירים ריקים ומתחננים לקצת מזון, כיוון שישראל הפסיקה את הכניסה של כל הסיוע ההומניטרי לרצועת עזה. הדברים האלה ידועים למנהיגי העולם, מקבלים דיווחים ויודעים יפה מאוד מה ישראל עושה ברצועת עזה, אבל הם עדיין לא הצליחו להביא את עצמם למקום שבו הם יאמרו לממשלת ישראל, די.
אנחנו רואים יום יום תנועות של התנגדות ברחובות של כל הבירות בעולם נגד הג'נוסייד.
אנחנו בבצלם, ישראלים ופלסטינים שחיים פה, בין הירדן והים. אנחנו מאמינים בזכויות אדם, בחופש ובשוויון. אנחנו מאמינים שלכל מי שחי פה מגיע לחיות בביטחון.
מניעת ג'נוסייד היא לא רק חובה מוסרית, היא גם חובה משפטית. כלומר, המנהיגים שמשתפים פעולה עם מדיניות ישראל, הם בעצמם שותפים לפשע הזה.
קראנו לדוח הזה הג'נוסייד שלנו, Our Genocide.
That's a report, it's called Our Genocide, the report by B'Tselem. I urge all of you to go to the B'Tselem website and download that report, b'tselem.org. Israeli human rights organization. Download that report and study it. It's the latest report over and above the previous reports showing that Israel is indeed committing genocide. And this comes from the horse's mouth. This is an Israeli organization that confirms that this government commits genocide.
כי זה מה שזה. זהו ג'נוסייד בבני אדם שחיים פה, שמבוצע על ידי בני אדם שחיים פה. לאורך ההיסטוריה, רוב העמים שביצעו ג'נוסייד לא הבינו והכירו בזמן אמת.
That's all point. Really, throughout history, will a nation that commits genocide will state that they are doing it in real time. That's why it's so disconcerting and disingenuous and ridiculous when most of the media news outlets like Sky and BBC and all of them that are now, too little, too late, showing the starvation and the suffering and the man-made Israeli-induced starvation and the shootings and the killings. But nonetheless, always still attempt to play the devil's advocate. Israel states that they are doing this. Why would you want to play or give the opinion of the criminal? Why would you want to do that? No nation that commits genocide will openly tell you they commit. Was Germany boasting that, look, this is what we are doing in the gas chambers to Jews. Did they boast? Did the Nazis boast? Did the Nazis boast? You know, the Nazis, for example, they had soup kitchens for Germans. Are you going to say, well, look, they're humanitarians now? You know, they had soup kitchens. They also fed and gave minimum feedings to the Jews. Are you going to say, well, look, they've engaged in humanitarian work? And this is the whole point, is that it's a disingenuity. Nobody expects a nation that is committing genocide to say, look, it has committed genocide. Nobody's going to admit that. How ridiculous will it be? A criminal, a murderer, a rapist is not going to admit his crime, will he? You're going to expect that? So why would you want to give them the benefit of the doubt?
משמעות של מה שהם עושים. וזה בדיוק מה שקורה עכשיו בישראל. כל זה רק מגביר את המחויבות שלנו להעיד על הדברים כמו שהם, ולקרוא באופן ברור לכל מי ששומע אותנו, לעשות הכל כדי לעצור את זה.
אנשים וממשלות צריכים לנקוט בכל הפעולות.
So this is a call from B'Tselem, remarkable organization that basically covered this. I've just sent you the documents. Have a look at this. Palestinian genocide accusation, our genocide. That's a website. You go to not Amnesty International, but B'Tselem. Israel is committing genocide in the Gaza Strip, and this is a report. Our genocide. Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinians. If you want to see that, have a look at that. Go there, download the full report, download the summary, and then what needs to be done now. And I mean, this is a neutral report. They clearly criticize Hamas as well in this report. So there's nothing biased or Hamas propaganda in any way, shape, or form. I want all of you to have a look at this report and share this report with people out there and send it to news outlets and organizations on this particular point so that people can obviously basically know on this remarkable board. I want to end this program with two reports. A discussion that I saw actually this morning by this individual who's a Green Beret, who was in fact part and parcel of the Gaza GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, and he worked at the Gaza food sites. This guy here, his name is Anthony Aguilar, a retired United States soldier who worked as a subcontractor with UG's Solutions in the Gaza Humanitarian Aid Foundation, or the Gaza Death Squad Foundation delivery operation. And he made the point that we are involved hand in hand in the atrocities and the genocide that is undergoing. At the time of this particular report, at least 147 children had already starved as a result of that. And you can see the fact that there's now a lack of consistency between what Trump is saying and what Netanyahu is saying. Trump is saying there's no genocide, there is a starvation. Netanyahu says there's no starvation. But have a look at this guy here, who was a Green Beret, and see what he says pertaining to the when he was a contractor over the past couple of months. I'm going to share this, and then probably we can close the session with this here. Let me just share the screen so that you can see what he says. Anthony Aguilar, designed as death traps, exactly what I called them. Exactly what I called them more than 2 or 3 weeks ago, that these are death traps. And here's the Green Beret guy stating these are death traps. Have a look at this. Let's expand this.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the Warren.
A lot of people. I mean, some of those kids that's real.
Vast undercount. At least 147 Palestinians, including 88 children, have starved to death. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has denied there's any starvation in Gaza. But on Monday, President Trump contradicted Netanyahu's claim.
We can save a lot of people. I mean, some of those kids that's real starvation stuff. I see it. And you can't fake that.
In related news, a group of at least 21 U.S. senators has written to Secretary of State Marco Rubio urging the U.S. to stop funding the shadowy U.S. and Israeli-backed so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which was created to take over aid deliveries in Gaza, replacing the United Nations. Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen is the lead author of the letter. He appeared on CBS's Face the Nation Sunday and said the aid sites have been turned into death traps.
American taxpayers should not be spending one penny to fund this private organization backed by mercenaries and by the IDF that has become
a private organization backed by mercenaries and the IDF.
Trap. Over 1,000 people
Fatally shot as they sought food at aid sites. Anthony Aguilar is a retired lieutenant colonel who served for 25 years in the U.S. Army Special Forces as a Green Beret. Anthony, thanks so much for joining us on Democracy Now! Can you start off by talking about your experience in Gaza and telling us exactly what you saw?
Thank you. It's an honor to be here and to share this story. I do not call this my story. I call this the story of the oppressed, the story of the Palestinians in Gaza who are dying at the hands of starvation and violence.
This is the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation whistleblower, the guy who took that video showing the shooting. Listen to what he says. He was there on site.
What I witnessed in Gaza, I can only describe as a dystopian, post-apocalyptic wasteland.
A dystopian post-apocalyptic wasteland. A dystopian post-apocalyptic wasteland. That's what he calls it.
We, the United States, are complicit. We are involved, hand in hand, in the atrocities and the genocide that is currently undergoing in Gaza. For anyone who says that there is no starvation or mass hunger, or that not only are we at the precipice, but we have stepped over the line of wide-scale famine, to anyone who says that that's not happening, shame on you. Shame on you. It's inhumane. What I witnessed in Gaza at all 4 distribution sites. I didn't just go to one for a photo op. I didn't go to one to watch a distribution and then say, yes, this looks great. I spent days on end in Gaza at all 4 distribution sites, at Karim Shalom, where the aid is loaded for distribution, and at both operation centers that control the daily convoys, logistics, operations, and distribution for the 4 sites. What I saw on the sites, around the sites, to and from the sites, can be described as nothing but war crimes. Crimes against humanity. Violations of international law. This is not hyperbole. This is not platitudes or drama. This is the truth. I break that down by what I would describe as the sites themselves. I spoke to Senator Van Hollen last week, and we had a very frank discussion on the status of the sites and what's at these sites. The sites have not only become death traps, they were designed as death traps. All 4 distribution locations were intentionally, deliberately constructed, planned, and built in the middle of an active combat zone.
You hear what he said? They didn't become death traps. Again, what we said, vindicated by what we said. This is now a few days, just 2 days ago. This is what we've been saying from day one. Designed as death traps by this death squad. It's confirming that very thing.
Some may argue, well, all of Gaza is a war zone. That may be true. But there are parts of Gaza that are direct or that are determined to be active operational combat zones where Israeli Defense Forces are operating. Those sites were built in the middle of those areas intentionally. It's not by accident. That in and of itself, to designate humanitarian distribution sites to service an unarmed, starving population, to build them deliberately in an active combat zone, is a violation of the Geneva Convention protocols. It's a violation of humanitarian law. And in my opinion, it's a violation of humanity in general. The sites, not only where they were built, all 4 sites around the perimeter and the roads leading in and out are barricaded by razor wire. Not barbed wire, not concertina wire, that we use in warfare for obstacle obstruction or for paths. Razor wire. Geneva Conventions specifically prohibit the use of razor wire to restrict areas that civilians are servicing, hospitals, water points, food distribution points, and we're using it. Not only did the IDF provide it for us to use it on the sites, we, UG Solutions, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, asked for it specifically. Razor wire is designed to maim and kill, and we're using that to channelize and herd, if you will, thousands of unarmed, starving civilians. That's a war crime. The actions on the sites, escalation of force, no standard operating procedures to dictate that, no rules of engagement provided to the armed contractors on the ground. The indiscriminate use of force, lethal and non-lethal, against unarmed civilians. I want to make that clear. We aren't there on the distribution sites defending ourselves against Hamas. We are using indiscriminate force, targeting civilians, escalation of force that goes far beyond the measures of appropriate against an unarmed.
Wow. Did you hear what he's saying? Listen to what he's saying here. Just listen to what he's saying.
Dictate that. No rules of engagement provided to the armed contractors on the ground. The indiscriminate use of force, lethal and non-lethal, against unarmed civilians. I want to make that clear. We aren't there on the distribution sites defending ourselves against Hamas. We are using indiscriminate force, targeting civilians, escalation of force that goes far beyond the measures of appropriate against an unarmed, starving population. The equipment that we were issued, fully automatic weapons, which in and of itself is not a violation of protocol. However, we were issued M855 green-tipped ammunition. That's important because green-tipped ammunition is a steel-jacketed copper round that's specifically designed to penetrate armor. It's designed to kill. It's designed to shoot through reinforced objects to kill someone on the other side of it. That's what all the UG Solutions contractors are equipped with right now in country. Everyone carries a standard basic load of 210 rounds of M855 armor-piercing.
210 rounds each. Imagine that.
Military combat ammunition. Why would anyone need that? Even if to defend themselves.
Why would you need that? Why would a humanitarian organization need that? But it's not a humanitarian foundation. It's a death squad. These are death squads. And what you see being set up are death traps. Death traps.
Defend their lives against an unarmed population. It's inappropriate. That in and of itself, that action there is a war crime. I'd call the status of us being in the country. Every UG Solutions contract.
Now listen to this, what he says. Those who are there in the country, these UG Solutions contractors, you know how they're operating? They're not operating under any official terms. They are operating in Israel under a tourist visa. Can you believe that? Under a tourist visa.
American, U.S. citizens in Israel that are armed with fully automatic weapons in Gaza as we speak today, right now, and have been since the 26th of May. We are in the country on a B2 entry visa as tourists. We're in the country as tourists. So if a family member wanted to go to Israel to visit Jerusalem, they would enter Israel on a tourist visa. That's the legal status that armed American citizens are in Gaza right now with the authority to use hostile force against an unarmed civilian on a tourist visa. That is a violation of humanitarian international law, period. The things that I just described are not just opinions, they're facts. The sites were designed to lure, bait, aid, and kill. The food that we distribute, nowhere near enough. To Mr. Johnny Moore, shame on you for celebrating 92 million meals delivered into Gaza.
Yeah, how much is 92 million meals? If there were 92 million meals, you divide them by 2.2 million. How much does that feed? And that's if 2.2 million, in fact, get 92 million meals, which just ridiculous.
Shame on you. It's a very simple equation. 92 divided by 2.2 million people divided by 3 million or 3 meals a day. That's what GHF proclaims. We've been distributing aid since the 26th of May. 26th May to now the 29th of June. 64 days of continuous distribution. And we've only managed to distribute 92 million meals. When you break that down, again, it's a simple equation. That's 14 days of meals. So out of 64 days, we provided 14 days of meals to the entire population in the enclave of Gaza. That's inhumane. That would be like saying that you only eat every fourth day. You only eat on Thursday and you only eat on Monday. And to say that that's humanitarian? So to anyone that says that that's enough or not even close to enough, the narrative of GHF needs help to do the rest, you don't need help because you're not anywhere close to where we need to be. The fact is the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is not trained, equipped, manned, or staffed to run humanitarian aid and humanitarian assistance of this magnitude. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation needs to be defunded, shut down, and the United Nations needs to be allowed back in full scale, supported by the United States, resourced, helped. Instead of giving the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation $60 million, use that $60 million to support the United Nations mechanism.
That's what Trump was making. He made the mention with Starmer, and even before Ursula von der Leyen, that we gave $60 million. Nobody thanked us. Nobody thanked us. You gave it to this death squad. $60 million to this death squad, who are not, in fact, giving food to the Palestinians, but are murdering Palestinians.
To get 400 sites back to operating, to feed 2.1 million people every day. That was the capacity of the United Nations. So what I saw in Gaza, to me, concerns me as an American. What we are doing in Gaza, in being complicit with what the Israeli Defense Forces are doing, is un-American. I didn't come forward to talk because I want to disregard the struggle and the fight. I stand with Israel against Hamas in their atrocities.
See what he says? He's not a pro-Palestinian individual. He's not pro-Palestinian anyway.
The world stands with Israel against Hamas and their atrocities. No one would argue that October 7th wasn't atrocious. But if we as a nation, the United States, and Israel, one of our closest allies, if we go down the road of saying we're doing what Hamas did and saying that that's okay, we are losing our humanity. And we cannot go down that road. It's un-American. It's not in line with our values. 2 months ago, I hung up my uniform after 25 years of service to this nation. I didn't hang up my oath. I swore an oath to the Constitution. I didn't swear an oath to the president, to the Congress, to a boss, to a contract, to a paycheck. I swore an oath to the Constitution of the United States of America. And that Constitution is underlined in American values: dignity, respect for human life. Right now, America is on a dangerous road. And if we don't stop now, end this, and back the humanitarian aid process that should be going into Gaza, shame on us. Un-American. I'm going to make sure the truth is known.
Wow. So I just wanted people to listen to this. I just thought it was an absolutely powerful comment by an individual who's a former Green Beret, so he knows what war is, and he's by no means a pro-Palestinian activist, but you can see the scale and the shocking scale of what we see there. Quite remarkably, which I didn't know, I never knew the fact that these individuals there are even on a tourist visa. They're on a tourist visa, a violation of international law. This is an individual that essentially, basically has exposed, has underpinned and cut exactly what these particular people are doing. I mean, Johnny Moore, this evangelical right-wing religious fanatic, all these individuals themselves, they were basically involved and running this kind of death squads. These are death squads that are in operation, and we need to basically call this out completely and utterly in terms of what is transpiring and what we see here. I don't know if we've got anyone there that's in behind. Mohammed, do we have anyone, or there's nobody that we see. Otherwise, we're going to just call this to a close. I'm a bit exhausted myself. I'm not going to show any more videos, but I thought that last video was a powerful testimony in terms of what's going down on the ground, and that was extremely moving in terms of what the GHF is. So for those out there, in line with the topic, go online, go to this organization called B'Tselem, and download that particular report, and then have it on PDF and share it on your social media account, as well as emailing it to almost every major news outlet you can get. So if it's your journalist next door, if it's your reporter, if it's some TV show or some right-wing pundit out there, or right-wing news program or media program like GB News or Talk TV, I mean, you guys are sitting there. You can go to these stations and hand these documents up to these journalists and ask them to discuss this. Demand, as service providers, that they discuss these particular issues. Share it with them. And of course, share the stream. Click like and subscribe to the South African Debate Initiative. I see there's no one wants to challenge us. No one wants to come in and discuss the particular report. So we're going to bring the session to a close. And obviously till next time, obviously the question is, who says Israel is committing a genocide in Gaza? Well, an increasingly large number of people, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and now, of course, you've got B'Tselem, the Israeli human rights organization that has produced this 88-page document, which I urge everybody to see and study and share with others. And of course, we'll continue these discussions in the foreseeable future. So till then, it is Yusuf Ismail. It's going for 11 in South Africa, and I wish all of you the greetings of peace. Till then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.